Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Michener Art Museum. Thrilled to have you here. I know many of you, but not all of you, so it's exciting to see some new faces in the audience. I'm Ann Corso. I am the Executive Director and CEO here at the Michener Art Museum. We have many people to thank, both for today and for the exhibition that is inspiring this talk. So many thanks to our exhibition sponsors and supporters. Barbara Donnelly Bentivolio, thank you again and again for supporting this. John and Terry Paone, I didn't even see you in the audience. I don't know if you're here. Are they here? Thank them. Alma, thank them for us. And of course, it's no surprise that we have such a huge crowd of supporters, family, friends, fans, and fellow artists. And so I know that many of you know Peter's long and illustrious history. You know his career of teaching and mentorship of many artists through his time teaching at the Pratt Institute, the National Academy of Design in New York, and at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, where he spent over 30 years teaching and heading up the printmaking department. That is quite a testament. You likely also know that Peter has been painting and creating art for almost 7 decades and exhibiting his work both locally and nationally. And you will see his work in many regional museums, institution, and private collections, should you get an invitation to those homes. But what you might not know is what prompts this incredibly creative artist to put brush to canvas, or panel, or paper, or any of the number of artistic mediums that he is so fluent in. You might not know what inspires his creative mind to assemble these incredible still lifes that are anything but still. And so today, I am very excited to have a slightly different format. This is one that is an absolute conversation between our headlining artist, Peter Paone, and our own Gerry and Marguerite Lenfest chief curator, Laura Igoe, in conversation about Peter's life, work, and inspiration. So thank you both very much. Like I said, we will turn over today's program to them and come back to you all with questions, which I'm sure you'll have. So for the moment, let's give a warm welcome to Peter and Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see as Anne said, so many familiar faces, but also I know there's many friends and family of Peter, also students. This is just lovely to have such a great crowd to support Peter today. So thank you. And I'm so excited to have a conversation with Peter. We've had many conversations together about your work leading up to this exhibition and following the exhibition's opening. And every time I speak with you, I learn something new, so I'm excited to learn more new things from you today. Whoop, too fast. I hope many of you visited the exhibition before coming to the talk. If not, there'll be time, of course, after for you to see as well. And I have many of Peter's paintings in the show reproduced in this PowerPoint. This exhibition includes 40 paintings, 40 still life paintings dating from the last decade. And you'll find more of these still life paintings in the catalog, which is available in our shop. And Peter is still painting these still life paintings. The last time I was at his house after the exhibition opened, I saw more of them. So they're still in progress. So I wanted to kick off our conversation today, Peter, by talking about what interests you about still life paintings? Why this focus on this subject at this point in your life?
Well, most of my work is figurative. Most of my work throughout my career have had to do with the human condition. And the still life, historically, has always had a bad place in the history of art. In the 17th century, there was the Guild of St. Luke. They catalog or categorize artists' work. And the most important was historical and religious work, because then you were both religious and you were knowledgeable. Next to that came the portrait, and the portrait was commissioned by the wealthy to document their lives. And after that, there was the landscape, which usually was an estate that they were commissioned to do, and several other things. And way on the bottom was the still life, because the still life was made by not so intelligent artists, because all they had to do is buy a few fruits and vegetables and paint them, and they were sort of dismissed. As a result, it was relegated to women, and the women artists did most of the still lives of the Dutch painters, and they did fabulous still lives, which were not really recognized in their time, but are now. I mean, their flower paintings and their arrangements were to the precision. And they were only the women who were the daughters of artists, because they were not allowed to apprentice men and other artists, so their fathers taught them. And throughout the history of art, still life was something that everybody did now and then. But it wasn't until the 20th century where still life, through Cubism, brought in modernism, because Picasso and Braque used the still life to express their concept of modern painting. I, as a student, was very much involved in the Cubist concept, because Cubism opened the world to invention, which it didn't have before that. And I tried throughout my career to paint still lives, and they were okay. It was not something that I really thought were my best work until recently, because what I'd done is not use the still life as a found object, but used it to express a lifetime of involvement. And it was a way of not only reaching the age that I reached, because the kind of still lives I'm painting now that are in there, I could not have painted 40 years ago. I couldn't have painted 50 years ago, because I didn't know that much. My experiences were still building. And at this stage of my life, I used the still life as a means of bringing together and in some way resolving all the things that I've done in my life. So the still life, for me now, is a method of emptying. It's a method of expressing what I have done through the symbolism of the work itself, as well as the objects in the painting. So it's a way of concluding or bringing together almost 80 years of being an artist and practicing.
Thank you. I love the way you talk about the still lives, as you said, kind of encapsulating your life. They're a journey of a life lived, is how you've described them to me. Right now I have, when you were talking, I put up this image of a still life by Braque and Picasso, because I knew those were going to come up. I should have brought in a Rachel Roish. Now, if I could go back in time, I would do that. I also, and another image I brought in, you mentioned how you started experimenting with still life early on in your life, and we have a recent gift from you for our collection is this lithograph called Tabletop Landscape, which you made in 1971.
Right.
So this is one of those, maybe your first exploration still life, do you think?
It was.
Yeah.
The tabletop still life started in Paris, actually. That print, it's a lithograph, was done in Paris in the 70s. And it was, the way I work is I just let things happen. You know, I don't try to plan a great many things or a method of working, because it gets in the way. It gets in the way of my thoughts. By allowing things to just evolve out of my experiences, I'm able to put together things that I would not put together if I were planning. Most of my work evolves in the process. Even though I've done a lot of drawings in between, and there are some in this exhibition, I don't necessarily work completely from them. I allow them to give me a start and then take from other drawings themselves. And that's what happened in this one. In this one, I was in Paris, and I was exposed to a lot of other things. I did a lot of work in the lithography shops there. And this one point, I wanted to make a lithograph, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I made a tabletop, and I started to put things on top of it. And it evolved. And it evolved not only as a print, but as an idea. And for some reason, I didn't really follow up on it, and probably because it wasn't ripe. It wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And it took all of this time for me to go back to that idea and start assembling the objects. One of the things in my work process is that the objects don't necessarily have to have a relationship to each other, because life doesn't have a relationship with each other.
Right.
You know, things happen throughout the time that you try and tie together, and sometimes they have absolutely no connection. And so that's part of how it evolves out of the creative process.
Yeah. And I'm up on the screen right now. I have the lithograph, the tabletop landscape you were just talking about, and a work that's in the show now called The Gift. And when I was putting this presentation together, I was struck by ideas that were, as you said, were germinating, maybe not ripe yet, in the 70s, kind of have come back around, I think, because in The Gift, you're sort of, you know, this idea of a whole, you know, house and estate on a tabletop, right? Which is not something you usually see in a still life painting. You're combining landscape and still life with an animal, you know, with these unusual kind of, you know, compositions. I think it's interesting to see how those ideas for you have changed as you've, you know, over the few decades, and as you've gained more experience, you said, and kind of gathered more visual information too.
Well, one of the things I realized maybe 10 years ago, just by accident, I looked around my studio and everything was on the table. You know, my palette was on the table, my hat was on the table, everything was on the table. When I went to bed at night, I emptied my pockets on my bureau and everything was on the table. So I started to empty my mind and put that on the table. And images that I really liked and images that I didn't like, because there are people I really like and there are people I don't like. So you have this constant, you know, abundance of sources that I can work with throughout my life.
Yeah.
And as you know, and a few people here who know me and know my studio, I'm a collector of collections. I keep acquiring things. For years, I spent my weekends in flea markets, and they're all over my studio, and they're on all tables in my studio, and bookcases. So that all seems to come together as a visual thing.
Yeah. And now I'm I'm prying into your studio here and sharing with everybody, but a few photos that I've taken of your studio. One of these is in the catalog. But I think, and I'm sure you'll underscore this too, the idea that these these really unique and special objects that you've been drawn to collect appear in your work,
Right.
as they do in this in Friends and Rivals, number one, on the left, this goose-shaped basket that I always see when I'm in Peter's studio. But you're not putting that basket in front of you and painting it.
No, artists divide into two groups. Those that work from the outside in, and those that work from the inside out. Those who work from the outside in are, the realists. They work from observation. They cannot work unless they have something in front of them. And whether it's a still life, a model, a portrait, or to go out landscape painting, they're totally dependent on what they see. And that's kind of in front of the lens. In back of the lens, there are artists who work from the inside out, and they work from their life experience, they work from their imagination, they invent what they're interested in because you can't find it. And so having these two going that way, I'm an artist who works from the inside out. So when I set up a still life or decide to do a figure or whatever, even a landscape, I don't have anything in front of me. Mm-hmm. It's all from not only my imagination, but my skill. I mean, you can't work for 80 years in a studio and not develop an extensive skill to be able to not only imagine these things, but to execute them, to be able to see what's in my mind. So that by working on the inside out, I have everything at my disposal. Mm-hmm. But working from the outside in, it's only what I can set up.
Right. Thank you. When you were giving a tour for our staff and docents soon after the exhibition opened, you said something that really stuck with me, in that you said that still lifes tell the story of their time. I don't know if you remember saying that. But I like that idea because I think your work, and I'll go back to, I think, the slide that helps kind of illustrate that. Your work is very much engaged with the history of the still life too.
Yes.
But I think also, as we've talked about, it's engaged with the current moment of today. Mm-hmm. Not just kind of what you just said, this idea of what's inside the artist coming out, but also, you're taking in the world around you, right, and what's happening politically, socially, culturally. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you think still lifes reflect their time, and how you think your still lifes are engaged with our time today.
Well, in the history of art, for me, mm-hmm. If I go through museums and see still lifes, most of them are the most boring paintings in the galleries, because they are objects. Mm. They're not stories. They don't tell you anything. They're arrangements. They're abstract thoughts. You put a pair of hair in a basket there, and you empty the basket with apples, and, a very Cézanne-ish kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's very boring, because, I can go home and empty a basket of fruit and have the same experience. Mm-hmm. The things that are more interesting are things that are not really recognizable, are things that are new to the eye, or new to the person. So that one of the things about my still lives is they're not composed, they're designed. Mm-hmm. In traditional painting, you have composition. Composition allows you to create an illusion that has a foreground, middle ground, background, and it gives you the illusion of space. It gives you the illusion of place. So whether it's a landscape that goes from front to the mountain in the back, or a still life that has air that moves between the objects, or a model sitting, or a portrait sitting in a room that shows the interior of the room. Mm-hmm. That's composition. Mm-hmm. I don't work with composition. I work with design. Design is not something that works from front to back. You view a design painting from top to bottom and from side to side. It's planal. And that was the gift of Cubism, is the planal aspect of it. I arrange my objects in my work. I do not compose them. And that gives me an opportunity to place things where I want to place them rather than where they should be placed, which is what you have.
Yeah.
So that approach to still life is rather unique, but it's also very innovative and inventive, because you have to have that information to do it, because there's nothing in front of you. Everything is coming from the inside out, so that it evolves as you're working. And in composition, if you're stuck or you're not sure about something, you can move it around. You know. Or you can look at another artist's work and see how that does it. But when you're working with design, you can't move anything around. It has to feel right. Because in feeling right, then it sort of balances itself. And in order to have that ability to read that, you have to have worked for a very long time. And it's also a process of elimination. Very often, when you're arranging things, you have the sense that something is needed up there. And you can put a frame up there, you can put a window up there, or you can put a round yellow circle, or you can put a square black box, because it's a sense of balance in the design, not the object. So it's a difference between subject and content. Most people, or most artists who work from the outside in, work with a subject. Subject of landscape, subject of still life, the subject of portrait. And most artists who work from the inside out, that is not subject. That's a story that has to say something. So what I arrange in my still lives are about something. And it's about what I know, but it also allows the viewer to invent their own story. You can't invent a story when you look at a Cézanne still life. All you can say is, boy, that's a lot of apples.
I'm sorry, I'm looking because I did put a Cézanne still life in here. So
Yeah.
everyone can think about that while looking at it.
But when you're looking at a still life like mine, where the objects are not related, and they're,
Yeah.
not part of a subject, then you have to connect the lines
Right,
and connect the dots.
right. So I'm showing two examples of what you said you're not trying to do, of course, which is this work by Cézanne and a work from Matisse, and these are both paintings that are in the collection of the Barnes Foundation. And I was also thinking about the Barnes's collection while thinking about this conversation, because of course you spent a lot of time at the Barnes at a pretty critical moment in your own artistic training and understanding of art history. And the way you've just talked too about how you don't compose your still lifes, you design them, and you're thinking about the relationship between the different components. I'm wondering if you see any connection with that and the way that Albert Barnes arranged his collection in his ensembles, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
I don't know what Barnes had in mind when he was arranging things. I know he had a lot to arrange, and I wish he had a curator.
I know not everything in the Barnes collection is your favorite.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I know not everything in Barnes's collection is your favorite.
Well, my relationship with Barnes, when I was 16 years old, Violette de Mejia invited me to attend her classes, and I did. I was, looking at artists I didn't know. I was looking at artists that I did know, and I knew that most of the artists I was looking at, there were a lot of their work, and the best part of that was that I got to see a body of work. But also I was sitting in a room with artists that I had absolutely no interest in, and they were Barnes's favorite. I had no interest in Cézanne. I still don't have any interest in Cézanne, and I credit Renoir causing my diabetes. So there was a whole, there's a whole group of artists there. Matisse did nothing for me. I found him childish. And so,
Right.
but what Barnes did for me is they introduced me to modernism. Up until that time, I had read a great deal. When I was 13 years old, I read Gombrich's History of Art, all 600 pages. And when I was 14, I read it again. When I got to Barnes, I had this, extensive knowledge from my age of the Renaissance period. But I knew nothing about modernism. And if you were to ask me at that time, did I like Picasso, did I like modernism? I would have told you whether I liked them or not, but I would not have known what you were talking about in that sense. Barnes gave me that information. And from that point on, I realized that I was two things, and I built on them. First, I was a humanist. I was only interested in painting the human condition. And secondly, I was a modernist, because I was no longer interested, or not no longer, I was not at all interested in repeating what artists in the 19th century did or before that. I wanted to be an artist of my own time, but I didn't know how. And through Barnes, I was able to do that. And I was also very fortunate because that was my last year in high school that I was also sitting at Barnes. And from that last year, I started art school, which was not, the beginning of my art school years were not very good. I had a conflict with them. I knew too much. And it was very difficult to get past that first, couple of weeks even. And that's another story. But I attracted the attention of Ben Shawn. And Ben Shawn asked me to be his studio assistant. And for 3 years, once a month, I spent a weekend in his studio. That advanced and brought together a great deal of my thinking at the time, which I was trying to piece together, because it was all over the place, because I was constantly being exposed to new things. And I constantly exposing myself to new things, but I couldn't bring together. It was just pieces. So between Barnes and my experience with Shawn, it cleared up and gave me a direction that I built on.
I'm gonna, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of flipping through the PowerPoint as Peter talks and as I think of things to ask. I'm gonna get more into maybe some individual works, but to talk about some of your interests in the still life paintings as a whole. One thing that I think many people notice about the paintings is your interest in cakes, specifically. Cakes.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you talk about those cakes and,
Yes.
and what,
Yeah.
why they kind of draw your attention?
Those cakes come out of Cubism, and they come out of my interest in architecture. I use the cakes not only as a method of invention, but also to explore the various abstract structures without it being abstract, without it being something. And the cakes allow that because there's no one cake. There's no one no one way of thinking about it as a cake, you know? I mean, if I were to do broccoli, it's only broccoli. I cannot do very much with broccoli because it's all there.
Yeah.
You know,
Although you do a lot with asparagus, which we'll talk about in a minute.
That's another cake. It's all there.
Yeah.
You know, but a good cake is made from scratch. And, you know, it's not a box thing.
Yeah.
And my cakes are all made from scratch. So that it allowed me to create in a way that I had no other reason to. See, one of the, it's not a drawback, but one of the problems is that when I do something, I have to say something. It just can't be a fun thing. And it just can't be a, you know, something that moves me or something that's abstract. You know, I don't start a painting to see what happens. I start a painting to say something. And these cakes were not only an invention in the world of cakes, but also an architectural structure.
Right.
And that was a part of it.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, if you're diabetic, you've got to get your cake somewhere.
Yes, I think in several of your paintings, I feel as if you've created whole cities of architectural cakes.
Yeah.
They're like architectural follies to me.
Well,
yeah.
you know, that, again, in my early years, Cubism had such an impact on me that's what Cubism, and particularly analytical Cubism, you know, where everything is built and structured, as opposed to synthetic Cubism, which followed it. And when I was in my early teens, I copied a number of Cubist paintings, actually copied them. I copied a Braque, a Picasso, and a Wangri. Because I just wanted to take it apart.
Right.
And what I did then, I was about 14 years old. I made the copy, and then I made my variation of the copy. And then I made a variation of that copy until I understood what was happening and how it built in space. So when I made these cakes, I did the same thing. And what is interesting about that, it took almost 50 years before I applied what I learned there then.
Yeah.
Because I found a place to apply it.
Yeah. It seems to me in your work, nothing is really wasted, right? I mean, every kind of experiment you have in the past, you learn something from it. It might appear later, it might appear several decades later, but kind of can still come back into your work.
One of the things I learned from Sean, in 1958, when I was working with him, he did a print of the Sacco Vanzetti with the text on the bottom. And I was earlier than 58. It must have been 55. I was 19 years old. And I said to him, I said, Ben, you did this 30 years ago. Why are you doing it now? He said, it's my image, and I can use it any time I want. Well, you know, that was funny, but it was also very serious. And I never forgot that.
Yeah.
And so there's some repetition in what I do, but it's mine. So I can do it whenever I want. And I do, because sometimes it fits.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's important about this creative process of mine is that I would never went through a fine arts program. I went through a design program. When I got to art school, I thought, well, you know, I'm going to now have a real art training. And before I got to art school, I had accomplished the technique of watercolor and gouache. I was a well-established printmaker. I got that out of my high school, and we had presses. I was very, astute in art history. and I expected not to start to build. But when I got to art school, I went to the University of the Arts, which was then the Philadelphia Museum College of Art. It was dominated by the abstract expressionists. The whole fine arts program was dominated by the abstract expressionists. So in order to, I had no interest in that. And I didn't know quite what to do. So the first 2 weeks of school, I didn't go to class. I went to the library. And I spent my time in the library researching artists, finding artists I never heard anything about. First time, the librarian was very astute. When she realized my interest, she kept bringing me books. I had a table all by myself. It was all full of books. And I was going through them every day. And then one day, she said to me, "Why are you here? Why aren't you in class?" And I explained my situation, that I didn't want to go to class. There was nothing there in the fine arts department that interested me. And I knew too much. She said, "Well, you should talk to the registrar. He can help you." And I went down, I talked to him, and he said, "Well, I think you should take art education, because art education, the academics start from 4 to 7. And from 8:30 to 3:30, which is the class day, you can write your own curriculum." And he gave me a sheet that had all the classes on it. The first sheet was about the fine arts department, which I chucked. And the second sheet was about design course. And I said, "What is design? I never heard about design." And he tried to explain it, and then he couldn't. And then he said, "Why don't you take it? And if you don't want it, we can change it to something else." So I started to take the design classes. And I fell in love with them, every single one of them. And for the remaining 4 years, I went through industrial design, interior design, fabric design, fashion design, graphic design, jewelry, pottery. And throughout my career, I used it all.
Yeah.
I've designed tapestries and rugs and furniture and jewelry. Those paintings, every single table in those paintings was designed by me. There are no two tables were alike. I had some experience in fabric and wallpaper design because of my high school teacher was a fabric designer. And he worked for Burlington Industries. And I worked with him. When you design a fabric, you have to do repeats. That is, if there's a flower in the middle, you have to put a flower on top, flower at the bottom, and a flower on each side. That's how the machines read it, and that's how you decide whether it's what you want. My job was to do the repeats. So what I've done in those paintings, I turned those repeats into wallpaper, and I designed the wallpaper. I designed the furniture, and I designed the wallpaper.
Trying to find one that might have, there's a little bit of a wallpaper
Yeah.
design in Beasties
So my
and books.
backgrounds
Yeah.
are either have borders or some sort of pattern in them. So that design course that I had, all the figure paintings that I've ever painted, from my art school years to now, I've designed all the costumes, all the clothing. None of my people in my paintings are wearing store-bought. They're all wearing mine, particularly in my Halloween paintings. I designed those costumes as well.
Yeah.
So that the design education I got played a much greater role than if I had a traditional painting class, where I was dealing with methods
Right.
and a manual. When you're working from the inside out, there are no manuals. There's only life. There was a photographer named Cartier-Bresson, and he said, "If you live life, life will give you pictures." And I've never forgotten that. And, you know, I didn't set out to live life, I just lived it. But it gave me pictures. And those pictures are what I've been working with, and pictures give you pictures.
When you were speaking about your time in the library and not going to fine arts classes, I was thinking about the painting on the left here, which is Beasties and Books. It's a tilted tabletop with a stack of books.
Yeah.
And I know you think about this work too as a reflection on education today. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, although I allow things to happen, there are some things that I set out to do because I have an emotional reaction to it, or there's something about it that is more meaningful to me than something else. I graduated with a degree in education. I had taught for 50 years. The whole idea of the present administration banning books and defunding education was very meaningful to me. So I created this idea where the table's tilted, the books are sliding off, and a Mickey Mouse bookend is holding it up. The symbolism there was the education leaving our society so that the future generations will not be thinking about the great things that humanity has done. They'll be thinking about Mickey Mouse because they're not trained to do much more. He's not holding up those books. He's waiting to replace them. So that was the whole symbolism of that painting.
Thank you. And I also, you might have noticed in the presentation, I've made a point to include the frames with the paintings too. And you know a lot about the frame making tradition and have that training. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the frames for your work and how you select them or alter them, or sometimes create them yourself.
I keep repeating this, but a lot happened during my teen years to set things up. When I was about 15 years old, I was looking for a summer job. I needed the money because, being an artist is very expensive. You need materials all the time. No sooner do you buy, it's like food. No sooner do you buy it, you eat it, and you need more food. So no sooner do you buy materials that you use them and you need more materials. And we had no money. Any money that I could earn to spend on materials, I had to work. And I found this job in a frame shop in South Philadelphia. There were 3 Italian immigrants, they were brothers, and they opened this frame shop. One was a carver and a gilder, and the other one was a joiner and a fitter, and the third one was the businessman in front who cut mats in between customers. They taught me all these skills and also stimulated a passion for frames. Very often, people would bring in 19th century frames that they wanted the painting more modernized. And they would order a new frame. And Alex, the older brother, would say to me, "Do you want this frame?" And I would take it. And it could be a Stanford White frame, or it could be a Baltic frame. And I would take it not knowing much, except that I loved it. And from that point on, I started to collect frames. I have a frame shop in the basement of my studio, and I have over 200 frames in it that I either designed, I restored, or I had other cabinet makers make for me, or that I bought in mint condition. So I have this huge resource of frames, and my work looks very good in frames. Most modern painters, their work doesn't work with frames, but mine does. And so when I finish a painting, I go through my frames, and very often I rework the frame to fit the painting. So I know how to carve, I know how to gild, I know how to do all of that.
Yeah.
And frames are a very important extension of my paintings. And I resent very much when people want to change them. And I've
Have to keep
I've
the
had
frame.
collectors come and, they love a painting, and they said, but it really doesn't go with my interior. The frame doesn't go with my interior. I don't sell them the painting. I mean, I just say, well, you can't have the painting, because I know that no matter what they promise me, they're going to change the frame. So if I know in advance, I protect my frame. But if I don't know and they change, there's nothing I can do about it. So that's how serious I'm about these frames.
Yeah, so it's when you go in the exhibition later, you'll see all the frames that Peter has very purposely chosen for his paintings, and you'll see there's a
Now, the other
great
thing-
array of them too.
The other thing that I want to mention about these paintings is that they're all acrylic.
Yeah,
I work on a panel. I don't work on canvas. And the panel is an acrylic panel. It's called maximum density fiberboard, MDF. And it's hardwood sawdust, oak and ebony, bound in a resin. My paint is acrylic. And the varnish I use on them is acrylic. So those paintings are 100% synthetic. They are all plastic, which I enjoy because it reminds me of Dr. Barnes and plastic values. At last, I've embraced plastic values in the frame.
that's great. I'm gonna, conscious of time, I'm gonna open it up to audience questions. If anyone in the audience has a question, and Jen's gonna come around with a microphone. Is that what you're gesturing for? Great.
Just raise your hand, I'll come to you. Oh, right here, thank you.
Where may we see some of your earlier works?
Where can you see them?
Where? When?
Earlier works.
Where can I have no idea.
Well, we do have your
I have my own collection of earlier works.
we have your painting Sins of a Vampire, which is a figurative
Yeah, but
work
that's-
that's up now, and it's not that much earlier.
Yeah, well, that's about 15 or 20 years old.
And these aren't earlier either, but that was a nice segue, Barbara, for if you at the Woodmere Art Museum, they currently have a special exhibition of Peter's Snow People,
Yeah.
which is up
Now,
until
these are gouaches.
February. These are gouaches, but these are also more recent. And then your miniatures are also
Also, my
on view
miniature.
at the Woodmere.
Right.
Made Carnaby Street miniatures made in the 1970s, right?
I did, when I lived in London,
And then there's more of his work. There's a lot of his work at the Woodmere.
well, the miniatures are interesting because they contribute to a lot of my work.
Yeah.
When I lived in London, I was very taken by the miniatures on ivory, particularly the Elizabethan ones that are in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And so I started to do miniatures on ivory. And my smallest miniature was 3/4 of an inch, and the largest one is 2 inches. The Philadelphia Museum has just acquired 6, and 2 of them are 3/4 of an inch. So I'm very proud that I have the smallest painting in the Philadelphia Museum.
And if you visit the new McGuire Hall at the Woodmere, you'll see quite a few examples of not just the special exhibition, but other examples of his work on view.
Peter, I was amazed by your comments about Cézanne. I wonder if you'd comment about your feelings about Arthur Carles and his approach to still life.
It's a great question. Arthur Carles.
I'm sorry?
What are your thoughts about Arthur Carles and still life? His still lifes.
Who was Arthur Carles?
Who is Arthur Carles?
Every time I see a Carles painting, it reminds me of somebody else. So I don't think much of him. Because I don't think he's, there is no Arthur Carles as far as I'm concerned. There's only Arthur Carles who are second to somebody else. I mean, it's not somebody that I look at. I'm very up front with it. There are artists I like, and I look at them, and when I don't like an artist, I don't look at them. I don't, have an argument about, what they do or want to put them down. But if you ask me, I'll tell you. And if I go to a museum and there's an artist I don't like, I don't look at them. I don't look at half of the Barnes paintings when I go to Barnes.
Well, you don't want Renoir to make your diabetes worse.
Well, Unfortunately, sometimes you have to see them out of the corner of your eye.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid them.
Yes.
Jen's coming around with the microphone. Here you go.
Thank you for this talk. It's wonderful. Peter's a former teacher of mine and friend. I was wondering, looking at this work in here, I was struck when you're talking about the cakes. And then there's also this theme that carries through also of skulls. And I was just thinking, cakes oftentimes are celebratory, and in a lot of them they're like candles, implying birthday candles or whatever. And I just thought that was an interesting thing in the work that really is a dimension that's sort of, two extremes in a way, so that you have the death symbols, but you also have the sort of birth symbols and celebration symbols, and also, as I've mentioned to you before, the sort of dry, quiet humor, but also the sort of deep seriousness of your work. So I just find, I wasn't aware so much of this series until seeing it this time. So.
Well, it's just, serious, deep concerns, and there's humor. That's life. That's part of what we experience as we go through life. And a lot of it is drawn from that. It's not something you plan. It's just something that happens. One of the things that you don't find very often in the history of art is humor. You find false humor, like Franz Hals will have somebody laughing, but it's not, that's frozen humor. That's not really funny. I had a friend, Francesco Botero, and his overweight, his obese people are very humorous. And he's one of the few people, or one of the few artists, who was able to deal with serious humor in his work. And I have a great respect for that, because he got a lot of negative flack from the art world, but he kept going. And that's a very important thing, for it to happen. If my paintings are humorous, it's not because I set out for them to be humorous, it's because the viewer finds them humorous. That's the reality.
Mike's coming around. Oh, over there.
Hi, who are artists who you are fond of?
I'm sorry.
What artists are you fond of? You mentioned
I'm
Picasso and
fond of George Braque. George Braque has always been my go-to artist, as much. I'm very fond of Picasso, but certain Picassos, not all Picassos. One of the artists that I really like looking at is Norman Rockwell, because Norman Rockwell is the 20th century Bruegel. And his work is very much in tune with life itself. I don't look at artists in terms of how they paint or what they paint. I look at what they say and what they say to me. So that I don't really have favorite artists. I have the history of art that I refer to and look at. Not every work and every artist that I like do I like, but there are certain works that reach me. So I look at primarily representational art. I have very little interest in abstract art, very little interest in abstract expressionists. I have great respect for it, but it's not, it doesn't live in my house. I have other things that I would rather spend my time and my eyesight on than that. So that it's not a question of better. See, art never gets better. It never gets better. It only evolves. And you stop it whatever you're interested in. But it keeps moving. It doesn't get better. And it keeps replacing itself with new ideas. But the old ideas are still very useful. So, in answer to your question, is not who I like, it's what I like.
I think there was a question right here too, Jen, waiting in the front, second row. Sorry.
Peter, why do you like cats? Why do you like cats? We're all curious.
What's up with
You're
the cats,
interested in
Peter?
Cats.
Cats. What's up with the cats?
I'm not an animal person. If I want an animal, I'll paint it. I don't have to walk it, I don't have to feed it, I don't have to bring it to the clinic, you know, and if it bothers me, I'll turn it to the wall. It's the best animal to have.
I have a question, Peter. I know that in your studio there's a beautiful painting of Alma, a portrait. Were you approached to do other portraits? And if so, did you take liberties with the subject?
I'm sorry, I'm not getting that.
She's asking about portraits that might have been commissioned from you. She mentioned the portrait you made of Alma.
Yes.
But have you ever been asked to paint a portrait of someone? And if so, how did you take liberties or experiment with those? Is that right? Did I capture it? Thank you.
I've done 2 commercial portraits. One I did when I was in art school of a little girl who kept screaming. She must have been 5 or 6 years old, and I couldn't get her to stop screaming, so I painted her with her mouth open. And the parents said, well, can you close her mouth? So I needed the money, and I closed her mouth. But I painted the mouth with alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is a color that bleeds through. So today her mouth is open. And the other was, I painted a doctor, a cardiologist. And he was wonderful, and I loved that painting. And he would come and sit with his white coat, and within 10 minutes, he'd fall asleep. So for quite a while, I painted the coat and I painted the hands, and then I needed him to stay awake to paint his face. So I put on Sousa's marching band, which kept him awake, and I finished that. And that was the end of it. And I thought, after that, I'm not a portrait painter. You know, I'm not, there's no amount of money that can make me make another portrait. So I don't paint portraits. Now, I did paint my wife, Alma, but she didn't sit for it. I painted her from a photograph plus my own interpretation of it. And it's about 6 feet tall, and it's a watercolor. And I'm very fond of it.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
About 40 years ago.
And you painted many self-portraits, too.
I painted many self-portraits, but they weren't commissioned.
No.
So I didn't have to account for them at all. No.
But you also painted a series of the death of your father that was quite moving. And it was a print. It was a series of prints, but that was a portrait, nevertheless.
Just mentioned your prints that you made after the death of your father, as a portrait in a way of your father.
Well, yes, but I think the question was about commercial portraits.
Yes, that there was a follow-up comment.
Many of the portraits that I made of people that I know were made from memory. And in that case, yes, it was my father. But in many cases, I will paint or draw people that I don't mean to be and who recognize themselves, you know? And you know, one of the things about painting from life, I mean really life, not painting from a life model, and one of the things about painting from the inside out is that things make an impression on you, a visual impression. And sometimes they're fleeting, but you don't forget them. So that when I'm working, things come out that I didn't plan to come out, but once they're out, I keep them. And they're impressions that were made throughout my time with a lot of people. Now, I taught at 3 institutions. I'm familiar with 3 whole different faculty members. I've had legions of students. So faces have been coming to me, you know, for forever. So the fact that I may have something that looks like somebody was not intentional. You know. If I want to paint somebody or draw somebody that I think I want to do that, I don't ask them to pose. You know, I put it together from what I remember and give them that impression of that.
I just changed the slide because your still life wandering looks to me, seems like there's a face in that painting. So anyway, just thinking about faces that appear in your work. Jen, do we maybe time for one more? There's a lot, of course, so maybe a couple more questions.
Okay.
Or sorry.
There was a question.
Oh, there's one.
We can't go home without an asparagus story.
Oh, sure. I have the asparagus to talk about. If I can go back.
Asparagus was something that my father was very fond of. So as a child, we had a lot of asparagus. And so it was very often, it was my job to do the shopping in the Italian markets. And, you know, amongst the things that was always on the list was asparagus. And I love the shape of it. I love the form of it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not that fond of it,
Of eating it.
but I love the way it looks.
Yeah, no,
And
but here's
so-
two examples of asparagus appearing in the work, including it might be harder to see in what we preserve because it's holding up the what I would call a chicken
It's part of the
basket.
creative process.
Yeah.
It's part of the creative process. You know, how something becomes something else. You know. There was a very interesting story about Brock in the First World War. He served in the trenches, and there was lots of rain, it was muddy, and he needed to drink. He needed to drink something. So he took his helmet off, and he shot it full of holes. And he took a carafe, put it over it, and poured water on it into this container, and the carafe held all the mud, and the cleaner water came out. And the purpose there was that something is not always what it appears to be. So suddenly, what was once a helmet became a colander.
Right.
And so what's once asparagus became a column that holds something up.
Perfect.
You know, and that's part of how these concepts evolve into one thing or another. You know, it's very surreal
Yeah.
in many ways.
All right, we're good. Well, Peter's, you're gonna hang around for a bit if people
Yes.
want to bring up catalogs for him to sign. And thank you, Peter, so much for this conversation, and thank you all for coming.